Well, hey, I want to welcome Dan Westgarth to Blind Ambition. And today we're going to learn all about Deel. And in my humble opinion, I think it's just changing the landscape. I think it's going to change. I don't want to go and say change the world because that sounds too cliche-ish, but I think it's going to change the way people work and live. And you're definitely going to watch this because you're not going to see this anywhere else. So I think if you're comfortable, Dan, I'd like to put it to you, and maybe you could share for people who aren't familiar with Deel, what it's about, what you're doing, and then Rick and I can kind of, we have so many interesting questions we want to ask you about it.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me, Jack. Well, what is Deel in a nutshell? We help companies and businesses hire anyone, anywhere, which is very different to pay anyone, anywhere, which we saw a lot of over the last decade. We actually help businesses legally engage employees and contractors in another country. So in simple terms, a company based in the US can come to us, get an account on our platform, and start hiring people in multiple different countries around the world, everywhere from Mexico to Japan and everywhere else in between.
So you take care of all like the back office stuff, the taxes, the compliance, what you need to do to work and live in Japan, because it's not easy, right? I mean, it's a lot of paperwork behind it.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. The United States is a relatively simple HR market when it comes to hiring and onboarding employees. If you compare that with somewhere like Brazil, it's fascinating. In Brazil, an employee has to undertake a medical exam before they can even onboard and start work with the company. Or in Egypt, the employee has to prove their mandatory military service has been complete, and that certification needs to be verified by our team. And all these different kind of nuances vary around the world. So we've built a platform we now call Deel that unifies that, and we help set expectations on both sides. So the employee in Japan can experience something that they're used to, and the company that's actually hiring that person can contemplate and experience something that they're used to. And marrying those two things together across 100+ countries is a fun challenge that we've been working on.
Wait, so how many countries do you have people in now?
So we support hiring across 100+ countries. And we ourselves have just over 700 people working at Deel. And we are a team in 50+ countries.
That's mind-blowing.
So how do you recruit all these folks from all over the country for Deel? Do they start in the US and say, hey, you know what, Dan, I love you. I love working in the US, but I actually want to give, living in Japan a shot?
There's so many different cases and kind of topologies of different stories of how people found out about the company. We've definitely got a large number of people that fit into that bucket that you just mentioned, Rick, that were living in the States or perhaps in the UK that wanted to move outside. In fact, there's also a number of people that wanted to move into different parts of their country. So we had guys in New York and California that actually said, oh, I want to go live in a warmer climate, or I want to go live in a lower cost area. And then we have people that want to go and live internationally. So we have people in Mexico, people in South America, people in Europe. And then we have other buckets. So we have people that have found out about the platform, maybe one of their friends or colleagues are being engaged or employed through it, and they apply for a job with us. And actually, we've got now a growing team in the Balkans. We have people in Croatia. We have a lady working with us on the employee experience team that lives not far from where the Game of Thrones was filmed. We have people in Serbia. We have people in Turkey. We have a huge team in Pakistan. I'm currently calling from Peru, and I had the chance to visit Buenos Aires, Argentina over the last month. Now I'm visiting Lima, where we have a group of people, and tomorrow I'm going to be in Colombia, where we have another group of people. So it's just vast, and I think it's so interesting that the playing field is now level. You don't have to be located in the tri-state area or in Manhattan. You don't have to be located in the Bay Area. You can be located anywhere.
Dan, when you have people, let's say, in the Ukraine or Poland or Africa or Argentina, and let's say it's a tech-related, maybe software, is there a big variance between somebody who is in Silicon Valley, let's say the same years of experience, and somebody in one of those countries? Is there a huge difference, or are they catching up to what we have here in the US?
Well, it depends how you define variance, really.
Yeah.
You could look at variance in so many different ways. You could look at it from skills, experience, compensation, languages. I think at Deel, our hiring scorecards are very precise and pointed. We know exactly what we're looking for, exactly which companies we want people to have worked at, what they have done, what their qualifications are, which school they've been to. And the amazing thing is that that isn't someone in the UK or the US. It could be someone from anywhere. So I think to answer your question, no, there's not a huge variance.
So if you have, so let's say it's not Dale who's hiring, but it's, you're doing the pay, the back office stuff. But let's say you have ABC tech company in Silicon Valley is looking to hire, and maybe, you would see on Blind, where Rick works, they'll make 250, 350. I'm just making up a number. But in another country, let's say Africa, if someone has the same skills, do they get paid the same or not so much?
I think I know there are compensation deltas between geographical areas. I think what's most important is to think about the quality of life and take-home pay, and specifically the delta which is left after cost of living, so rent,
absolutely,
taxes, all of that kind of stuff.
Trust me, I live in New Jersey, so I know about taxes. When the time you're done, it's ridiculous.
So I think what we see is, yes, we see that delta. I think it would be materially unfair to pay someone in a low cost geo the same as someone in the Bay Area. I think that we're finding that in very precise cases and unique cases where that scorecard is really, really tight, then companies using Deel do end up hiring in those deals. But for something which is a little bit looser, let's say like an operations manager, the skill set is a little bit more generalist, the talent pool is larger, then we see more international cases.
Do you see companies choosing to, hire in one region for a specific role more than others, or is it quite diverse and quite broad?
We certainly see regional grouping. I'll tell you why. We're not a marketplace, so we don't help with the sourcing of talent. We just help with the kind of the hiring execution and the back office.
Sure.
So the company which is using Deel needs to have some kind of foothold when it comes to talent sourcing. So we often see companies make a couple of hires in, say, Mexico or Brazil, and then before you know it, they've got 20 people in each country.
Got it. And so kind of boiling it down on Blind, we have a lot of technologists and engineers that are, seeking, it's quite an international audience. They're seeking jobs abroad. What kind of tactical advice do you have for people kind of seeking those kind of opportunities?
Yeah, I think it's a very broad question. I always think when looking for the next opportunity, you should focus in on the company itself. And I think the company's culture, the way the company is designed, and its attitude to remote hiring will be reflective of how that organization runs in general. I find remote hiring cross-border, to be something which is still relatively new. It's something which needs to be understood, and something which requires good execution. Using a platform like Deel is not the only thing that needs to be deployed in order to do this well. You've got to think about things like, how do you establish a good remote culture? What's the tooling used? How do you work across different time zones, different religions, different languages, all of this kind of stuff. So I think it's really important to find a company that is forward thinking enough to adopt all of these different areas and kind of spheres that are required to make this work well, and not just look for a company that says, oh yeah, I can hire you in Mexico. It's really, you want to find a company that's willing to progress on all of these fronts.
Got it. And based on your client base, do you find that certain industries, I imagine tech is one of them, are more keen to hire remotely and employ people remotely or cross-border?
Yeah, I think if we look at tech as a whole, crypto companies, blockchain companies have been the quickest to move and react. I think that we've seen, moving out of tech, we've seen institutions and slower moving companies, or say slow moving industries. Let's take banking, for example. There are some players within that industry that do move very fast. I can't give a name here, but we've seen some of the banks which are at the forefront of technology in general actually start thinking about deploying a remote model, and that's really exciting to see that there are different industries doing this. It's not just exclusively tech.
What do you think about this, Dan? Because this kind of seems so interesting, but I don't know if enough has been spoken about it. So let's say, when I was looking through the data, that Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, some places you might not think of are bustling, where there's a lot of remote hiring there, and then they're accepting pay because the real and the other currencies have not been faring well. So they prefer getting it in cryptocurrency, in Bitcoin, or maybe in the US dollar. So what seems like you could end up having these hubs in Argentina, in different countries, where you have a large tech community who has a lot of Bitcoin, a lot of cryptocurrencies, which could probably change the dynamics of towns, cities, countries over time. Am I overstating it? Or is this something that, if this proceeds, and not just from Deel, but other places that are adopting this, remote work, like AngelList Talent is big. They're trying to do the same thing. They're doing their different kind of platform than you, but they're really ramping big time to get, remote, people working remotely for US companies and such. But doesn't that seem like a huge game changer?
Yeah, this is already happening. Where I had the pleasure of visiting Buenos Aires last month, and I saw it firsthand. These communities have really already formed of individuals working in tech and other sectors, working for US or European companies and getting paid in other currencies. And I think that's really, really interesting, especially when you double click on the crypto point. Let's use Argentina as the example. Argentina has seen the Argentina peso has seen a huge depreciation against the dollar. Inflation is at nearly 50 or 60% year on year, giving that individual that's working the opportunity to get paid in a decentralized currency or the US dollar is so impactful. And we're working on some really cool stuff at Deel, how we can support the long-term kind of financial needs of those individuals. So right now we're helping them facilitate work and payment for work. How can we help support those individuals over the longer term? How can we give them access to things like credit, savings, stuff like that? And we've kind of experimented with this stuff. We have a product called Cash Advance, where remote workers, specifically contractors, can take an advance on their earnings at a rate that's far better than what they would be offered in their country. And we've also launched a Visa card. We call it Deel Card. So remote workers can get paid directly onto this card, and that card can be used anywhere that Visa is accepted. And that's really powerful because it's instantaneous. Visa transactions are instant. So the day that you're paid or the day that you take that advance, you can actually go down the street and buy something. And that can be really impactful for so many reasons that we don't even think about living in the UK or the US. For example, let's say there's some new technology that's available. Maybe it's the iPhone, maybe it's something else. The stock of technology which is actually delivered to that country is so thin and few. Being able to take an advance, being able to use the Deel card and buy that thing is game changing.
So I would imagine the lifestyle of the person. So when we talked earlier, you might not pay let's say, let's take Argentina just for an example. Maybe they may not be paid the same as someone in Silicon Valley because, the cost of living, taxes, housing prices, et cetera. But if they're getting paid in cryptocurrencies, and put aside the last few weeks where everything was sliding, and if kind of rebounds, so they're going to be wealthy people compared to people who have a depreciating currency. So you could kind of see how they're going to just have an amazing life in terms of financial compared to their peers, right? So it's pretty wild.
Yeah, yeah, it really is, and it creates a great network effect because their peers, which see them earning, say, a base pay, which is a multiple higher than someone that's engaged locally, and having the option to get paid in another currency just makes it so much more attractive. And I think that that's really going to help the Argentine economy in this example, because those people are going to spend more locally. Companies which are hiring domestically are going to realize that they have to pay more to secure good talent, which is going to create more demand on VC in the topic of startup and technology. I think overall it's a net positive thing for the country and the economy itself. It's not just something which is going to be consumed by a small closed community. Yes, it starts off as small, but there's no reason why it can't be open and why it can't grow to be much larger.
Africa seems also another growth area, right?
Yeah, slightly different cases that we've seen. We've seen remote workers in developing parts of the continent that are highly skilled. They've been trained. They've been to school. They have experience, and they secure jobs with top companies. And the earnings that these individuals make are enough to power the economy of their local village. The money that they bring into that local economy really moves the needle. Moreover, in certain countries, the access to consumer credit and real estate credit, i.e. mortgages, simply doesn't exist in a number of countries. So we're seeing these remote workers use their earnings to save up, to actually purchase real estate to house them and their family. Well, this has not been done before. This is something which just hasn't been there in the ecosystem. Only a small number of individuals being able to do this, and now this is open to anyone that has the skills.
Because it's just the opposite before. So let's take a different location. Let's say India. How many people in India had to leave, let's say, their family and friends behind because they felt, hey, I want to go to Silicon Valley, I want to go to Wall Street, I want to go to wherever, and because they didn't have maybe the opportunity where they are, so they had to kind of leave. So that's another change. So now they don't. They can say, wait, no, I'd rather stay with my family and friends and neighbors and all that, and still have a really cool job. And even if my money isn't as much as there, it's going to go much further. And just like the Africa example, and in Argentina, all of a sudden you're going to reinvigorate your whole community.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm curious, which cryptocurrencies are you supporting in terms of pay for employees?
We do USDC, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, and Dash today. I'm a big advocate of USDC. I think it's really cool. The instant settlement is great. I can send this anywhere near instantly. And then once it's received, not only is it pegged to the US dollar, which is considered stable, that USDC can be invested into a yield paying account, whether it's with BlockFi or Circle or Gemini. There are a number of leading US institutions which offer this to non-US residents. So real game-changing flow, and I can get paid in USDC instantly. I can convert some of that into my local currency. I can save some of it in an account which is going to pay me a decent yield, and the rest I can keep. I can keep it on my wallet. It's mine, and it's secure, and it's stable.
So cryptocurrency is a very popular topic within the blind community, often because it has such a great technical challenge to it. It's so new. Things are changing by the second, by the minute, by the day. Can you walk us through how difficult or challenging it might have been to kind of flip this switch and start cryptocurrency as an offering?
Yes, it was not too difficult. I think that the kind of barrier to entry or barrier to adoption usually sits with the infrastructure stakeholder. So in the case of US payroll, ADP controls a huge amount of the market. ADP is kind of the infrastructure player there.
Right.
And if that infrastructure player isn't going to adopt this this cryptocurrency, it makes it pretty tough to take to market. And we've seen some different players out there do some different things. For example, Coinbase now will generate a unique virtual account number for you that can be added to any payroll system. And once US dollars are received through that unique virtual bank account number, they can be converted to Bitcoins or Ethereum or USDC. But then you've got players like Deel that are growing very quickly, that are willing to roll out innovations like this. We've seen great adoption from customers around the world. So while crypto can be quite challenging and tricky to get into the mainstream public domain, I often find that the blocker is with the infrastructure players or gatekeepers. But we're lucky that we don't rely on them. We build all of our own infrastructure, so we can get this to market. And the product is used by thousands of people around the world. This is really cool.
Great. And do you see that specific geographies or even like functions of employees are choosing to get paid in cryptocurrency more than others?
It's usually a mixture of guys that have currency stability issues. So we've spoken a lot about Argentina. Let's move over to Europe and Asia. Let's pick Turkey. So Turkish lira has also fed pretty weak against the dollar over the past few years. Residents of Turkey like to get paid in cryptocurrency, and then they will hold the cryptocurrency. Or in a similar kind of vein, individuals from countries with let's say challenging banking systems would like to use cryptocurrency. So if you're paying someone in the Caribbean, getting those dollars converted into local Caribbean currency and then settled into the bank account in the Caribbean takes a lot of time. It can take up to 5 or 6 days, and it can be quite costly. And those banks in that chain of transactions might hold the transaction for screening. They might send what's known as an RFI, a request for further information, to ask, why is this money flowing through to Haiti, for example. Those individuals are used to money transfers taking a long time. The expectation for a transfer coming from the US is 5+ days. Whereas if I can get paid in USDC, well, settled instantly into my wallet.
Interesting. And so I imagine USDC is the most popular choice among the cryptocurrencies on offer?
We just published a global hiring report, which includes the breakdown per currency. I think Bitcoin is our most frequently used currency of choice, or crypto of choice.
Got it. Jet, what do you think about employees choosing to get paid in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies?
I think it makes sense. Why not? If you want to take, it depends upon the person's risk tolerance level. Right. So let's say you're comfortable taking a risk. And as I understand it, you don't have to take all or nothing, right? You could take, as I understand it, right, Dan, you could just take a portion of your salary to go into crypto. So then why not? If you're a young person and you believe Bitcoin is going to be the future, I probably would do that and say, hey, all right, let me put a little bit aside, see how it goes. And then, and just, let it roll, let it ride and see what happens. Now, for other people who don't have that luxury, you don't have the privilege, let's say you're just starting out and, you have to pay the rent and you have all the expenses, you have tuition, that might be tougher because you just need every dollar to pay off stuff. So you may not have the opportunity. But personally, I would opt for that. I would opt at the very least like a certain percentage to see.
Got it. Because right now in the US, we hear about it in the news. It's almost limited to kind of like a fad, right? The mayor of Miami or the mayor of New York.
So you're skeptical, right? Is that
right? But to hear, I mean, there are actual practical uses is quite amazing.
The thing, Dan, I wonder, let me, what happens, and please don't take this the wrong way. What happens if all of a sudden, like Microsoft is like, okay, we're going back to the office February 28th. If and Google and Amazon and who else, Facebook, they've been all, well, Meta, they've all been buying real estate during the pandemic. Are you worried that the remote work trend might kind of slow down and that might hurt business? Or there's just enough companies that enough people want remote work that it's good?
No, I'm not worried at all. I think that real estate and the privilege being able to go into an office is still really valuable. I use an office when I'm in New York. I use an office when I'm in London, but I like to separate parts of my home life from my work life, right? And I don't use it every day. I use it a few days per week. I think this remote flexibility that we have will remain. I think there are, of course, a few exceptions. There are businesses that require on-prem people. It'd be interesting to see how those cases develop, because some of those on-prem use cases where we thought I had to have the team on site every single day have managed to survive and operate with a remote model. Be interesting to see if they really mandate back on premises. But I think of the companies you just mentioned, there'll be a hybrid kind of setup.
So even if it's a hybrid, the companies would still go to you because you have to work in the days that they're not in the office, wherever they decide to be. If they're a digital nomad, if they're living in a different country, different city, different state, they still need that back office to kind of take care of it, even though they just couple in, couple out.
I think if you double click on it, it's interesting. We typically see businesses in the US that have a HQ and a secondary office. Typical kind of setup is California and New York, or perhaps California and Atlanta, or some other kind of what I consider to be a tier 2 city. No offense to anyone from Atlanta. I think we kind of see these two kind of real estate hubs, right, in the United States. And then if we want to have someone working in New Mexico or Arkansas, or we want to have someone in Mexico or in Canada or in the UK or in Pakistan, those individuals want real estate or need real estate. I think it's probably a need rather than a want, and also equipment. So here at Deel, what we're doing is we're building a solution so you can kind of provision that real estate access. And of course, that's through partnerships with firms like WeWork, and then also equipment. So laptop that you can take between your home and the office. Also making sure we have the ergonomic furniture to sit in the home office, make sure that the chair, the desk, the keyboard, the mouse is suitable. And doing all that from platform. And I think doing it on platform, there's a couple of things. Makes it really quick and easy, but also provides that system of record, which is really, really important. So you know where all of your physical assets are. You know who has access to which real estate facility. You know how often they're using it. That's really powerful from a managerial perspective. Otherwise, it's very, very complicated to keep track, right? No longer can you stand at the foot of your desk and see, oh yeah, my team of 10 people are here today. I can see them and I can count them and I can do a roll call if I wanted to. Having that view digitally is really powerful.
So I could see, as you're talking, there's just so many different things that you could add on and scale up over time.
Yeah, I think that almost takes me into like a slightly different direction for a minute, and that is that we're seeing now that you mentioned that a lot of the big tech companies have bought real estate and invested in it through the pandemic. We're also seeing that a lot of the big tech companies that are Deel clients are now investing heavily into remote benefits, because those real estate centric benefits are not being consumed. And what I mean by that is I could think of various companies in the Bay Area which were serving breakfast, lunch, dinner, on-premises gym or yoga. They would have some kind of event twice a week. Those benefits can no longer be utilized, and incoming talent, when they are assessing what benefits are available and they're remote, they're looking for remote type of benefits. So can I actually get furniture which supports my body as I'm working? Can I get access to online communities? can I get access to that real estate, but can I only do it for a couple of days a week because actually I want to look after my niece or my nephew from my sister that lives across town. And I think that kind of whole benefit sphere is changing so much, and that's really, really important because setting up those benefits is a lot of work. To do it well, it's really, really, really high barriers to entry and barriers of execution. And that's across things like healthcare, insurance, all of the other stuff that I've mentioned. All of this stuff has to be built and has to be tested and has to be rolled out on platform. And that's what we're seeing the biggest customers want. So they're really, really bothered about wanting to see Deel doing.
It's amazing because it's just so many layers to it. I can see it. So you're kind of going away from, you know, the ping pong table, the food, the kombucha on tap. It's more of like, okay, I'm home, you know, 3 or 4 days a week. So I want to get different types of benefits that's more applicable to the ones you mentioned. So how about this, Dan? Do you think, Rick, what do you think about this as well? So let's say this keeps growing, right? At a fast pace, you know, Deel, Panther, Remote, all these other places that are doing it. Could that end up hurting, let's say here in the US, could that end up hurting workers where then companies start doing a cost benefit analysis and saying, do I hire Jack, who's an old guy who's falling apart and making a lot of money, but move that job to like a different country, a different place, not just tech, any kind of job. And then all of a sudden, you know, people in the US or the UK or where have you might say, oh my gosh, it used to be if you are looking for a job, you know, you're competing with people in your radius, right? You know, let's say New York City, you can get people from, you know, from Long Island, from New Jersey, from Connecticut, maybe, and that's your competition. Now, if you remote work everywhere, you're competing against the whole world. Do you know what I mean? Is that going to kind of squeeze people out? Is that how will that play out, do you think?
I have two kind of data points. So
yeah.
First one is I think that this does actually go full circle at some point. So I have friends that went remote right at the start of the pandemic, or even before the pandemic, and they've been remote for a couple of years. Those people now are moving back to New York because they miss the hum and the buzz of the city. Right. So I think that some people, sure, they'll be remote forever and they'll build their families and their lives in another country or another area. But there are others that do want to go back to the city where they started or kickstart their career because they miss it. There are many other attributes and factors which make the geos of New York and California and London and wherever else really appealing. That's the first thing to note. I think the second thing is when it comes to specialized roles, and I think really in tech, all roles are specialized. I used the example before of the kind of generalist operations manager. My dad would argue that operations manager for a tech company is highly, highly specialized, right? And I think the best talent wins. And given that kind of the full circle painting that I just kind of laid out, I don't think it will have a negative impact, say, on the United States or the UK. I think that people will still choose to be geographically located here or there.
See, but I'm thinking not so much, I could understand going back to New York City. I'm just thinking they'll get passed over because companies say, I don't want to pay a New York salary to this person. I'll get somewhere else. So they're kind of price themselves out. Or could this happen too, where let's just take all right, I feel maybe because like my compensation is such, they're going to say, hey, it doesn't make sense to have Jack in New York. We're going to get someone remote. Would then make people say, wait, you know what? Heck, I'll get out of New York. I'll kind of move to a different country, different area, and I'll just work remote from there. I'll take less money, but the cost of living is less. And maybe I have, the savings, selling my house and so on, which again, would make another complete change of how this is all playing out in the future of work.
I think talent prevails. Well, I think talent are specialized in some way and they control the talent market. And we've kind of seen that through the growth of Silicon Valley over the last however many decades and New York for even longer period. talent will place themselves where they want to be, and the best people will be hired. Out of the 700 people we have at Deel, we've never, ever, ever once said we want to hire this person in Thailand because they're cheaper than Rick in San Francisco. It just never happened. We always go for the best person that we think is going to have the biggest impact on our business, help us move quickest, help us meet our objective. So, well, conceptually, it kind of makes sense. Maybe you can imagine a business sat in a boardroom and thinking, yeah, we're not going to hire here anymore. We're going to go for cheaper geos and people which are a lower cost of the company. In practicality, I just don't see it happening, at least in the technology industry.
Have you seen an increase just knowing that focus and talent, people trying to adopt that nomad lifestyle and say, hey, if Deel can pay me wherever, I might be in Thailand one month and Mexico the other?
Yeah, we have for sure. We've seen.
That's what you've been doing, right?
That's right.
Well, my case is a little bit different. A little bit different. We have seen people that have moved around frequently. We've also seen some really cute stories, I'll say, of long distance relationships, people getting together and finally living together. We've seen a couple of cases where an individual's visa has been declined several times over, and they can now take their work with them. They can live someone with their partner, which mutually works. There's a ton of stuff. It's cool to see.
And this goes back to when we started talking about it. It's just wild how it just changes so many things that if we had this conversation 3 years ago, we were like, what are we talking about? This doesn't make any sense. I can't comprehend it.
I'll give you an angle which not many people think about, but some of our team have thought about this because there are now so many options, particularly guys in the European Union, because of the freedom of movement. Unfortunately, the UK is no longer part of this, but we have guys that are based in Europe, say they're based in France or Germany. Now, the location in which they can live is so unconstrained. There's no constraints. It becomes really challenging to actually decide where to live, because previously your job would mandate you to be in Paris or Berlin or Munich, but now you can live anywhere. And I've had people come to me and say, where should I live? Can you please give me some kind of constraint? Just give me a time zone or something.
Well, do you have that as an offering, like to say, hey, here's, just if you're curious, here's the best places to live, here's the cost? Is that something you have?
Maybe we could do that.
Yeah. All right, Rick, let's do it. Wait. No, don't listen, Dan. Hey, Rick, how about this? We could put that together. Right. Like here's the where to live guide. Okay, if you want to go to Buenos Aires, here's how much it'll cost for an apartment. Here's what it costs, to eat out. Here's what it costs for whatever. If you want to, go to, I don't know, Israel, here's what it's going to be. Oh my God, that would be pretty neat, right? So this way you can kind of tell, right?
Because that data kind of exists. So you scrape around Google, you'll find it on some websites that look like the front end hasn't been updated in 10 years, and you could build a really nice experience out of that.
All right, Rick, we're on to after this. Let's go. Let's start, and then we'll sell it to these guys. How's that?
Exactly.
Well, because they have that kind of when you retire. You ever see that? You always see, even if you're not interested in retiring, you always see that where to retire, and then they'll give you like, Costa Rica, and here's what it costs to get a house. Here's what it costs this, and they kind of lay it all out for you. You're like, and then you're like, huh. That sounds pretty good. Wow, I can live like a king. I'm going to move. So yeah, this is what's so, Dan, see, this is what blows my mind about this. It just opens up possibilities that we never had before. That to me is just the thing that just so amazing, because when I started working, I lived in Brooklyn, but Brooklyn before it was cool, it was really bad. But you would go to Manhattan. That was it. Like there really wasn't much thought. You go to Manhattan now, anywhere. It's wild. You can go and work anywhere and live anywhere. It's remarkable.
Yeah. Like I think the infrastructure points are interesting. So going to you mentioned retiring, going to retire in Costa Rica. How do you get the residency visa to live there? Many countries now have freelance visas. So you can go to the Bahamas, you can go to the UAE, you can go to Estonia, Portugal on a freelance visa. It costs about $500. You can do it in 10 minutes. But then you might need to get a bank account there. You might need to get a local ID. You might need to get a lease on an apartment. Like all of this infrastructure
taking all the fun out of it, man. Now it's a lot of work.
But this creates really nice problems for other companies to solve, and maybe Deel will solve that. Who knows? But this is all really cool stuff.
Oh my gosh. Well, speaking with you, Deel sounds like a fantastic place to work. what makes a candidate stand out when you're looking to hire?
I took notes on this, Rick, so let me refer to those. I think it's this sounds sort of really cliche, but first of all, be confident and be yourself. I think is really key. We're kind of at the stage now where we don't hire for say not for junior positions. Most of the positions we're hiring for are mid-level, senior, and above. So we want candidates that are specialized, that have done it or some of it before, so they can really hit the ground running. And if you're in this bucket, I think it's really important to lay out an interview process, how quickly you can get up to speed, how quickly can you understand the topics that we're working on, how quickly can you have an impact to the business, because speed is really everything at this stage. If you're not in that bucket and you are a junior candidate and you're applying for one of the junior positions, we do still have many of them. I think it's all about commitment and will. I think you need to prove to us and to the interview panel that you're really committed and willing to go the extra mile, willing to learn the different skills that are required to be successful. And there are many examples of junior folks at Deel that have done really well, and they have executed on their own vision of coming in and learning new skills, and it's really great to see them flourish and do well at the company.
And because of what the company does, are your job postings just remote everywhere, or do you tend to prefer someone to be in a specific region or country for kind of collaboration's sake?
We have regional focuses that usually skills linked. So for example, we're hiring kind of the equivalent of a HR business partner in 50 plus countries. So we can help our clients' employees should they need help. So for example, we call this team employee experience. We have a posting right now called employee experience. Germany are looking for someone which is skilled in German HR. They don't necessarily need to be based in Germany, but they need to have that skill. Or similarly, we might be hiring for a communications expert in LATAM. We require that person to have the skills and the connections in LATAM, but they physically need to be based in LATAM.
Interesting. And you've mentioned this already. Kind of, can you walk us through the highlights in terms of opportunities for professional development at Deel?
Yeah, I mean, there are tons. So we have the kind of traditional formal structured systems in place, which are feedback loops between managers and subordinates, learning and development budgets. But I think the biggest opportunity lays in our flat management structure. I think because we're remote first, our subordination ratios are leveraged a little bit higher than the traditional company. So we don't have that many layers. I think of a bank, from a Bank of America, there's a gazillion layers, and the subordination ratio is pretty tight. It might be one manager to 5 employees. At Deel, we want to keep the leveling pretty thin. This prevents politics. It prevents BS, frankly, and we want to be really kind of direct and collaborative. So that flat management structure means that a team can have a lot of impact because they're not hiding behind a hierarchy. And then if you combine that with our really kind of fast growth, then the opportunity for promotion is there. Because we're growing so quickly, we constantly need to change that structure. We need to promote people to managers, just that subordination ratio. And to give you a hard data point here, this time last year, we were about 100 people. We're 700 now, so it's changing rapidly. So we're not prohibiting promotion through this structure. And generally speaking, we're big advocates of promote rather than hire. So we've seen a lot of people be promoted within the organization, opposed to hiring external talent to come in.
Got it. Interesting. No, Dan, thank you for your time. I think to cap it off, Deel is a remote hiring company, right? So you're helping thousands of companies hire, pay and comply with local laws abroad. What is that? HR, payroll, compliance, perks, benefits, kind of the full gamut there. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, this is great.
Yeah, thanks Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? Kind of one left before we go. And
Yeah.
this is probably not a fair question to ask. Do you have any sense of how many people could be, working remotely across the world? I mean, any data points, do you think?
Every investor will ask me, what's the market size of remote hiring? I say to
Yeah.
them, this is not my problem to think about. I'm an
Yeah.
operator. I care about making sure everyone is paid on time and
Yeah.
complying with the various rules and regulations. I don't know, but it's huge.
You got to be huge. I'm gonna look into see if find data for that because it just seems like it's gonna keep just growing. And it's gonna be, yeah. Rick, like think about it, like the amount of people, if this keeps going, even if people start going back to the office, but they're only going 2 days a week, and then you count the people who are home 3 as quasi remote, the numbers are gonna be staggering of
Right,
remote
right.
workers everywhere across the world.
Just the globalization, right? Like every
Right.
single industry, every single
Oh,
company.
speaking of that, what do you guys think about this before we go? I'm sorry, I know we were wrapping up, but I'm just like, my mind spins with this stuff. Do you think it's better for society that when you have an office, Dan, and Elizabeth, you probably see this in meetings, like you have somebody from Israel, you have someone from Argentina, you have someone from Poland, you have someone from the US, you have someone from wherever. Isn't that a great way to kind of break down barriers, where people may kind of have preconceived notions about a certain country, a certain, their social norms, et cetera. But then when you're kind of all together, you realize, they're pretty cool.
Oh,
And
oh
I
yeah.
mean, am I stretching it, or is that kind of, by having that, that's really good for society as a whole. When you get to see people, like maybe you've never met someone from the Middle East, and now you meet them, like, oh wow, I didn't know this about your culture. I didn't know about your what you do. This is amazing, and it kind of bridges a lot of gap. It bridges a lot of stuff.
For sure. Yeah, we definitely see this. And great to get those people together to meet. So while we are remote, there are still those physical in-person touch points, whether it's company events or retreats or
Yeah.
this kind of stuff. And when they happen, that's really amazing to see someone that from a different culture, different religion, different part of the world, different hemisphere, and then after you meet with them physically and in person, then you realize, well, this is exactly the same person that I've been speaking with virtually for the past 6 months, and they're great. And that's really cool.
Yeah. Well, that's great. So that's no more questions. It's just, because as we said at the beginning of the conversation, it just, as you go through it, you realize the changes that it makes all down the line. And a lot of it are so positive. I think just good for people and good for cultures and good for, everybody to just kind of get to know one better, which is a good thing to do. So I appreciate it, Dan. Thank you so much.